All right, so opening weekend of Dark Phoenix is coming to a close. Not a lot of people saw that movie. Did you see that movie? No? Good for you. If you did see it, I'm sorry. But if you saw it and you liked it, glad you had fun. As long as you had fun, that's what matters for you. But at this point, I figured I would just rank the X-Men movies because I've seen other people rank the X-Men movies and I'm like, what a good fucking idea. The thing that'll be different for this one is I'm not actually including the Deadpool movies because I just see them as different movies. I don't see them as X-Men movies. I know a couple of X-Men are in Deadpool. Doesn't change the fact that I just fundamentally see Deadpool as different movies than X-Men movies. Kind of like if I were ranking X-Men comic books, you can have X-Men comic books with Deadpool in it, but I wouldn't rank Deadpool comic book stories with the X-Men comic book stories just because they're in the same universe. If I were ranking the Iron Man movies, I wouldn't put Spider-Man Homecoming on that list, although Iron Man is in Spider-Man Homecoming. Just the way I say it. You may disagree. If you do, cool. Also, New Mutants is supposedly going to come out, and I'm doing this before that, but I'm only 50-50 as to whether or not that movie's actually going to come out. But that said, for the X-Men movies I am ranking, there are 10 of them, which means this is prime for a countdown. So let's start the list, starting from worst to best. Starting with
Number 10.
Starting off at the bottom of the barrel is the recently released, that's right, Dark Phoenix. If I'm being honest with myself, Dark Phoenix and what I have for number 9 are probably tied for very different reasons, but tied nonetheless. But since this is a fresh taste in my mouth, it just feels worse. It just did nothing for me, except it made me feel like the third human back in Human Centipede. I won't lie, I was pretty mummified waiting for it to end. This movie had no direction. It was just cheese from start to finish, in all the boring ways.
Number 9.
Number 9, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Cheese from start to finish in all the cheesy ways. This movie's ass. The X-Men movies were spearheaded by Wolverine. They were like, let's take his origin story, which is a great, compelling one, and really just kind of shit on it. And by kind of, I mean absolutely. Though my first video that I ever did on YouTube was actually Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, X-Men Origins Wolverine inspired me. That made me like, oh, I want to rant about this. I'm not going to, I'm not interesting. And then by Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, I was like, all right, I'll do it. This movie definitely had a hand in that though. So thank you, Origins Wolverine. Maybe that's the thing that it has over Dark Phoenix. I don't know, it's shit though.
Number 8.
Next up, X-Men 3 The Last Stand, or Dark Phoenix only done better. Never thought I'd say that. I always thought, I always professed, I always wished, I always hoped, I always knew that if they ever did Dark Phoenix after X-Men 3 The Last Stand, it would certainly be better. It wasn't. This movie's actually better than Dark Phoenix. It actually at least had a plot driving it forward. The whole they found a cure for the mutant gene, that's actually a compelling plot. It's just in an ass of a movie. In the bottom tier like this, you find anything you can. And that's what I can find here.
Number 7.
Next up, X-Men Apocalypse. I actually enjoyed this movie for what it was. This was the one where I was like, well, I can have fun with it. And for me, Apocalypse wasn't bad like the ones below Apocalypse on this list. I mean, it had none of the depth or drive that the X-Men movies above it on this list had. Completely wasted Apocalypse. He wasn't menacing, he wasn't scary, he wasn't terrifying. He didn't feel like the apocalypse. So it all depends on your mood. When I reviewed this one, I was like, oh yeah, I can have fun with it. I've put it on in the background while I'm editing, and that's perfectly fine as well. Fine is the word to describe Apocalypse.
Number 6.
Next up is the Wolverine. This is the one I actually defend. Like, there are people who are like, fuck the Wolverine. The last act of the Wolverine kind of falls apart when he starts fighting a silver samurai robot, essentially. But a lot of the rest of the movie I really dug. Where Logan starts out in this movie, he's kind of a nomad. Then he goes to Japan. A lot of people wanted to see him in Japan. Granted, they already did Deathstrike. I feel like if they did the Wolverine now, they'd be like, chronology is so fucked, we'll just put Deathstrike in it. I know she was in X2, so what? So yeah, I actually dug this one. But in a world where I understand the last act of a movie can make or break a movie, the last act of this movie broke it for you, I get it. But the last act of the Wolverine didn't compromise the first 2 acts for me, so I walked out going, yeah, that was pretty kick-ass.
Number 5.
X-Men, the first one. It's great. I don't even give a shit. I've seen people like, it doesn't hold up. I've watched it recently. It totally does. I remember watching the first X-Men movie when it came out and I was like, comic book movies aren't supposed to be this good. But I really have that nostalgia in my brain. I really dug what they did with Wolverine. I thought Hugh Jackman was a great representation of him, which is why when people were like, this person they cast as whatever character is too tall or too short, Hugh Jackman's way too tall to be Wolverine. He's not as cut as Wolverine. I remember going into this movie like, oh, that's not Wolverine. Then I saw the movie and I was like, nah, I can get behind him. And in this first X-Men movie, who doesn't empathize with Magneto? You totally get where he's coming from. Didn't expect that. I'm just used to villains being villains in comic book movies. This was like, no, you're an empathetic villain. You're a dick. You're going about it the wrong way. But I see the leaps you've taken to get there. That was new to me when I watched the first X-Men movie. There was even a twist. You Dear boy, whoever said I wanted you? It's a comic book movie they really tried to take seriously in a time where they didn't have to. And that mindset is something the X-Men movies would lose as time went on. Then they would get back again, which is nice, and then they'd lose it again. Point is, the one that started it all, still like it.
Number 4.
What's better than the first X-Men movie, the second X-Men movie? X2 XMen United is proper sequel without any of the sequelitis. Delve deeper into the intrigue that is Wolverine's past that they kept completely vague in the first movie. The bad guys have to team up with the good guys to take out a common enemy. Solid sequel. One could argue great sequel and great movie. It looked like the X-Men movies would never go down. They had momentum for days that would last ages. Well, but for what we'll call the first wave of X-Men movies, this was the pinnacle. It was the best of them.
Number 3.
Next up, X-Men Days of Future Past. Days of Future Past and what I have for number 2, that's the immortal war of what is better. I love both. Part of me that wants to be like, I flipped a coin to decide for this video. I kind of did, but I didn't, but I kind of did. I flipped a mental coin anyway, like, all right, I'm just gonna go for this. But Days of Future Past was solid. Again, have things that don't make sense, at least the movie never explains them, like how can Kitty Pryde, who walks through walls, now blast people's consciousness back in time? All right, you have that thing that doesn't make sense, but I'm gonna forget about it, because the rest of the movie just thoroughly entertained me. You have a great moment with James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart. It really felt like a passing of the torch, which is really what this movie was. Once again, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is carrying this movie, also the franchise. It was an exciting adventure, a great time travel adventure. It was great seeing this Elseworld fork in the road. You still kind of felt like, oh, we're in an alternate world where Mystique is good, crazy. Little did you know it wouldn't matter by the end of all of it, but still, it felt cool at the time. Regardless of what's become of the X-Men franchise because of the shitty X-Men movies, doesn't change how great the good X-Men movies are. Days of Future Past remains in that tier.
Number 2.
Next up, X-Men First Class. This is what I was talking about. Is it X-Men First Class or Days of Future Past? What's above? The music in X-Men First Class. Things have themes, and I'm a sucker for themes. Like Magneto has a theme. There's a theme for Cerebro. When they're doing their montage training, there's a theme. When Xavier and Fassbender are having romantic bromance moments, there's a theme. Not only that, but this movie came out swinging. I wasn't really looking forward to it. After X-Men Origins Wolverine, there was no way anyone was going to convince me this would be good. Turns out we got a great X-Men movie. A proper X-Men Origins movie where Xavier met Magneto and they were friends. By the end of this movie, you totally buy the fact that these two friends have found themselves on opposite sides of this line. It takes place in the 60s in the Cold War. That's a compelling time. And Kevin Bacon totally crushed it as the villain. It humanized Charles Xavier. Before this, for me, Charles Xavier was this person who was just like, he's on this other pedestal. This made me go, oh no, Xavier was he was a young dude having fun, doing a big beer shot. The path of Charles becoming the Xavier that we know. The path of Eric becoming Magneto that we know. It was damn entertaining and compelling and surprised the hell out of me because I had written these X-Men movies off. I'm like, all right, they're garbage now. Apparently not. This was the CPR the X-Men franchise needed before it would later burn instead of drown. On to number 1.
Number 1.
Number 1's Logan. Are we surprised? It was gonna be Logan. Logan's next level. Logan was great. It was deep. It was meaningful. It was human. It was about human connection, but didn't lose the fact that this is still an X-Men movie. This is the proper concluding chapter to the X-Men franchise. This is where it ended, friends. This is it. Did all the X-Men die off screen? Yeah, of course. Better than the actual final installment. Hugh Jackman and Sir Patrick Stewart were snubbed for nominations for this movie. The acting was just, it was crushing. It was heartbreaking. It was funny because there are a couple of curmudgeonous old dudes like Statler and Waldorf with claws and a wheelchair.
Fuck you, Logan.
Did you cry at the end? I did. I'm not afraid or ashamed to admit it. It's the only X-Men movie that made me do that. Logan's the best of the X-Men movies for me, and it's also the proper send-off to the X-Men franchise. Also ends our list. So that's it. That's my ranking of the X-Men movies from worst to best, based on my very subjective opinion. Please do keep in mind, this is just my opinion. It's just how I feel. It's how I see them, and if there's one franchise that's so divisive, it's the X-Men franchise. I've seen people be like, the best is the Wolverine or the worst is Days of Future Past. It's like, it's so varied. So for me, in my wedge of reality as I'm seeing it, this is my list. And as this is a top 10 list, some people will love, some people will hate. If you like this video, or at least if you appreciate it in any capacity, if you can click that like button, that'll help the video out, thus help the channel out. You've been doing that lately and it has been helping. But did you see Dark Phoenix? What did you think about it? Did you like it more than I did? Did you hate it more than I did? And if you want to rank your X-Men movies to all of it, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.